It is an important film. Now you've seen it, I think you can all agree. And I'm just going to open very simply with the panel's reactions. I'm going to start, Amira, with you as the Israeli on our panel. What was your reaction to watching Israel's Reel Extremism?
Of course, I've seen some of those. Oh, sorry. Do you hear me?
I think you should be close.
Yeah.
We hear you.
Okay. Of course, I've seen several of the scenes, not all. And I heard more people talking about it than me watching, because sometimes it's so gross that I cannot watch it. And I do wonder whether the change is about soldiers really filming themselves, committing war crimes, and giving this extra, or did this extra exist before selfies and before TikTok, etc., and we just didn't know about it. So in a way, I welcome it. Let them expose themselves.
And Najla, what were you thinking as you watched?
Well, I think much like Amira, I'm not entirely surprised by it. There are things that, just because of the way I grew up, and I think most Palestinians, whether they're in the diaspora or not, have a different understanding of what the Israeli army is like, and I spent much of my childhood in Beirut during the 80s, so I had a different experience of the Israeli army than, say, my American Jewish friends. So there's a part of me since October 7th that is, on the one hand, frustrated because I've known all of this for a long time. On the other hand, I'm relieved that people are finally beginning to see it. But I also actually had a similar thought to Amira, which is it the culture of the filming that makes it worse, or is it something that just has always been a part of it? I don't know. But yeah, as someone who grew up with a panic button in her house because of Meir Kahane trying to kill my father, I was not totally surprised. But it's still hard to watch.
Simone?
Not on.
No? We'll get there.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes. Okay, here we are. Yeah, I mean, this film just fills me with despair and horror and anger. I can't help, like, the entire time I was watching this, thinking about a line that I've been hearing a lot from American Jewish leaders who say that the word genocide is a word that was chosen to make Israel look bad and to trigger Jewish feelings and Jewish traumas of, having experienced genocide ourselves in the past. And I can't help but watch a film like this and just think about the genocide denial that we see happening across America right now. The 62 Democrats who voted to block State Department funding so that the State Department won't even cite the numbers of people who've been killed in Gaza. I mean, genocide denial is happening across America right now, and it's something that, like, every day for the last 9 months I've been asking myself, how is it that we can see this and then people with power in this country are lying to us about this reality that we can all see?
Well said. Quick question, because I'm not the technical person. Is everyone okay with the echo on the mics?
Yeah, there's an echo. Yeah, it's rough.
Can we get rid of the
I think
echo?
it's weird for us.
Anyone? We'll try. All right, we will continue to that. Amira, for me, the most shocking character in that documentary when I first watched it is Ryut, the aid blocker, who's carrying a baby on her back in order to go block aid from going to babies in Gaza. And in her head, what's so fascinating about the characters in this film is they don't think they're doing anything wrong, they think they are the heroes of this narrative. And you live there, you see these people. How hard is it to get through to a Ryut? to the aid blocking mother and her friends?
I'm really surprised because I don't think that I would ever they would ever agree to meet with me. So I envy you, the filmmakers, that you reach them and you let them even continue and explain and show how they are.
Credit to reporter Inigo Gilmore and Karim Shah who went out there. If to continue with Simone, what bothers, I won't do hierarchies here, but what's standing out is that, and exactly what Gilmore was asking, there is no commander and no Israeli politician that stops it. And this is the main change. I remember, it's very confusing there. I remember in 2002, when the Israeli army invaded Palestinian cities and set curfews, there was a unit for a whole month in the Ministry of Culture in Ramallah, or El Bire. And when they left the building after a month, it was undescribable because it looked like a public, how would I say it politely, a public shitting house. So I wrote a list of questions. I published an article that I published with a detailed description of the building. And I sent the office of the military spokesman a list of questions about the building. I got a very evasive answer, and some years later, the commander of the area told me that he ordered the soldiers who give the answers, the soldiers at the military spokesmanship, not to answer. He said, how could I answer to such a thing? So he was shocked. He didn't want to expose, he didn't want to condemn the soldiers, but at least he had a set of values that he knew that it is shocking. Now we don't have such commanders. They don't think that they have to hide, which is, for me, it is really amazing. I mean, they give, and the parents too, they allow their children to be in 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, be exposed as war criminals based on their own self-incrimination. This is amazing. Najla, when you hear that soldier, the kitchen fitter, saying he feels superior to Palestinians, when you hear Itamar the pundit saying, I have no issue with humiliating the Palestinians, you can't speak like that or think like that unless you've dehumanized an entire people. And I wonder, is it the dehumanization of the Palestinians that goes to the core of all of this, not just with Israeli society, but with elite American opinion here in the United States as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I was thinking as I was watching it, as someone who's grown up in New York City my whole life, particularly on the Upper West Side, which is has always been a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, and is in the last couple of years, 2 years ago, my sister-in-law's first cousin, Shireen Abu Akleh, was murdered by the Israeli army, and there were people who I see on a daily basis who told me to my face, no, it was a Palestinian. And I said, no, I have actual information at this point that it was not. It was an Israeli soldier. And they would still say to my face, no, it was a Palestinian. So there's a level of the dehumanization that goes into everyday talk where people don't even realize they're doing it. And that's what struck me about this, is we have a lot of this in this country among a certain, I don't know if it's a class, the powerful class, let's say, where there are offhanded comments of a similar nature. This person I know, a neighbor of mine, was in my apartment, in the doorway of my apartment, and asked me to move the keffiyeh out of the way because it offended her. So I, although was not completely shocked by what I heard, I think that there's levels of this dehumanization that trickled right down into our society, and it's not just Zionists or Jewish people or anybody. There is a dehumanization of Palestinians as somehow different that pervades all society for sure.
Indeed. And Simone, what is the debate inside of American, Najla touched on it as an outsider. As an insider, what does the debate inside of American Jewish communities look like right now when it comes to the inhumanity of this war, this genocide in Gaza? Is it a case, like we saw in the film, well, they deserve it. This is what they deserve. Or is it a case of, as we also saw in the film, well, it's all Hamas propaganda. This is all Hamas. Even though, as we also saw in the film, they are posting their own crimes on TikTok regularly in this war, like we've never seen in any conflict before. So you've obviously been the protagonist in Israelism, another fantastic must-watch documentary. And the reaction, I wonder what you get to films like that, to TikToks like we've seen tonight, to the war itself. I'm just trying to get a sense.
Yeah, I think that, the thing that I was thinking about watching this also is that very recently there was this polling that was released that actually, from a conservative Jewish think tank, that showed that at this point, over 50% of US Jews actually support cutting military aid from Israel over the invasion of Rafah. And those numbers are obviously significantly higher among young people. It's like over 40% of American Jews think that Israel's committing a genocide in Gaza right now. And so there's a really interesting and very stark contrast, I think, with this rightward shift that we're seeing in Israeli society and the opposite happening among American Jews, and even more so among young Jews, but I think it is important to say that it's happening more broadly across our community. Now, at the same time, we still have an American Jewish establishment that is so aggressively in denial, so aggressively seeking to warp the public perception of what American Jews really think, that they, I already mentioned this, we have Jewish leaders going on TV, like saying that genocide is a slur, that all of this is just an attempt to, make Israel look bad, make Jews feel bad. But more than that, then we have this whole effort to basically brand any sort of public discussion about this, and then calls for accountability as anti-Semitism and as threats to Jewish people. And I think, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I do just want to say about that like, I watch this and I'm, especially like on a day like today where, with the far right winning in France and this kind of broader anti-democratic, these movements that we're seeing actually growing all over the world, including in this country, I think it's so dangerous to kind of like shield the Israeli right from any sort of accountability for their war crimes, for this genocidal animus, all under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism. Because this is part of this broader fascist movement, and I think American leaders, American Jewish leaders, are going to wake up far too late to the ways that they are actually supporting the weakening of democratic institutions here and the weakening of democratic movements here through their shielding of Israel, the Israeli government, and the denial of what is actually happening there.
It's such a good point. And one of the reasons we commissioned and produced and funded this film is because what I've noticed covering American politics in DC is that people like to talk about an Israel that exists in their imagination. There's a lot of wish casting about an Israel that may have existed in the past, may never have existed, but certainly doesn't exist in 2024. And the point was, and I'm going to be sending this to as many members of Congress as I know, because they don't see this stuff. They're shielded, to use your phrase, from this stuff, and then they're able to say anti-Semitism. Amira, talking of shielding people, you work for Haaretz, which is the oldest newspaper in Israel, the most liberal media outlet. But most Israelis, sadly, don't get their news from Haaretz, from you. So how many Israelis see what's happening in Gaza? We saw Amira Hass in there in the film talk about how it's not on the nightly news, there's no talk about Palestinian suffering. How much censorship, to use a word we don't use as much as we should in Israel, how much censorship is there, not just military censorship, but self-censorship by leading Israeli journalists, both historically but especially post-October the 7th?
It's enormous. It's the self-imposed censorship of Israeli media, general media, is enormous, and it has been discussed and it is known. I sometimes, when I look at it, there is such a difference from what I see, of course, and what I know and what I hear, and from what is shown on Israeli TV. And they are very conscious of it, and they continue. Now, the word censorship is misleading, because nothing will happen to them if they do show. So it's not a dangerous censorship. It's not, at least not until now. It is a real self-chosen censorship that has gone for years. Other media do not report about Israeli atrocities. And I'm talking about the incremental atrocities. This is a word that has been used a lot since 7th of October. And rightly so, 7th of October, there were atrocities committed against Israelis, and not only Israelis, civilians, not only soldiers, committed by Hamas and other Palestinians. But there are decades of atrocities committed by Israel, by Israeli military, by Israeli bureaucracy, by Israeli civilians against Palestinians. And the accumulation of it no Israeli has had the chance to see it because they just don't show it. The media doesn't show. But it's more than that. It's not a paternalistic reality where you need the media to decide for the people. The people can choose to see. They can open even CNN shows more. They don't need to see Al Jazeera. They can see in other.
You want to take this one?
Yeah. They can see in other media, and they don't. So the Israelis choose not to know. It's the media reflects or listens to the request and the needs and the decision and the behavior of the Israeli society that doesn't want to know. They don't want to know about settlements. They don't want to know about Israel stealing the water of Palestinians. They didn't want to know the details about the blockade over Gaza for years. They don't want to know about the policy of closure that has fragmented Palestinian society and territory since the beginning of the 90s, not since 2005 or 2006. They don't want to know these details. And the media is acting like somebody who serves the people's needs. So the opposite to what the media should be.
Yes.
Sounds familiar.
Well, Najla, I'm going to come to you next. For so long after 9/11, Muslims, Arabs in this country and beyond were analysed, pathologized, put under the microscope in ways that your late father, of course, so brilliantly documented. We were asked about our extremism, where were we radicalized, who are our hate preachers, religious fundamentalism. And yet today I notice in the West and amongst colleagues of mine in the media, no one wants to ask these questions of Israeli society.
Yes.
No one wants to ask, go beyond a Netanyahu or a Ben-Gvir, which are easy targets, and we touched on both in the film. But no one wants to ask who radicalized the kitchen fitter, right? No one wants to ask who radicalized the guy running barefoot on the beach. And I think that, for me, is just such a glaring double standard that we're not willing to have that conversation.
Absolutely. And I think, just simply since October 7th, the amount of asking about Hamas and God love all the people who had to answer that question and came up with clever answers, but just the premise that any reasonable person would not condemn a horrible thing that was, out of nowhere and, very violent. It's just absurd to assume that we all somehow were cheering along. And I had people stop speaking to me right away after October 7th. And I would say, well, I'm not even Muslim, as if that matters. But so a lot of the absurd questions that we get asked, we don't get to explain. And then exactly as you said, Israelis never have to explain. And again, I have people say things to me that are really actually offensive, not microaggressions, and dehumanizing of Palestinians constantly. And if I dare ask or say anything about it, then I'm somehow a horrible person. So it's true. I do want to know where these people got radicalized, though. Amira?
Well, before we come back to Amira, I'm just going to bring Simone back into the conversation and say, as I mentioned earlier, you were in Israelism. And that had a lot of play. A lot of people saw the film. Congratulations to an important film. But again, I'm just wondering, in the power, let me play devil's advocate. We just made this film. We're about to release it next week. How much power do you think documentary filmmaking has? That's the ability to tell stories, the ability to go out and report on the ground, the ability to share narratives that aren't being shared. What was how many people do you think you got through to with Israelism?
Well, you know, if everybody listens to the amazing ad you're giving right now, maybe we'll get through to even more.
Well, this
Tell
crowd,
more people to watch the film.
doesn't need that much help, I'm hoping.
Look, I mean, I think it's I feel incredibly blessed that Israelism has been a tool during this time that, you know, has helped, you know, again, peel away another kind of part of the mythology, as you were referencing. And, you know, I'm thinking about, like, you know, I had a conversation with someone this week who said to me, you know, if Israel just wanted to, like, you know, it would be good for their image if they would just, like, let a little bit more aid in. And I was like, do you understand that they don't want to let the aid, like, that's the point, to starve people to death? Like, and I think there is, you know, President Biden has this incredibly outdated, you know, rosy picture of Israel that's so detached from reality. And yeah, I mean, I think each of us, what we're doing through these stories are pulling apart a piece of that lie and hopefully enabling a different kind of conception of reality to come through. But I mean, I know we're reaching a lot of people. I think the question really still is what we're going to do about it, right?
Yes.
Actually, what kind of concrete steps are going to be taken to hold this government accountable for there to be an end to Israeli impunity and an end to the genocide?
Last question before we go to the audience, to you, Amira. My Zeteo colleague, Diana Boutou, wrote a piece for us recently where she talked about living as a Palestinian citizen in Israel, in Haifa. And she talked about how, quote, genocide fever has taken over parts of Israeli society. Do you share that view? And how, to pick up on Simone's point, how do we fight back against it? How do Israelis like yourself fight back against that? Because the attitudes we saw in this film tonight, they didn't just pop up on October the 8th, right? They have been building for years. How do Israelis who don't share their views, how do they push back against them?
You know, I'm lucky because I don't live in Israel. I mean, I most of the time spend in the West Bank. So I'm not exposed to this like Diana is. And it's true, it needs years. It's not enough one day of atrocities committed by Hamas to unleash this wave of Israeli, very general cruelty, stupidity, murderousness, all the adjectives that you can add here. In general, I think, and Meirav touched upon it, is this atmosphere of impunity for decades. That Israel can commit, let's forget international law, but violate basic values that also Israelis acknowledge that these are important values in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. That's why they denied that it is violating them or does not respect them. This incremental, I mean, everything that Israel, the settlements, the water, and I repeat the water, that Israel steals from Palestinians, the land that Israel keeps stealing from Palestinians, stole and keeps stealing. So we got an impression that everything goes well. I mean, nobody punishes us for this. At most, they can condemn us, but no punishment. So this young men grew up into this. They don't have another set of values. In the 70s, at the beginning of 67 occupation, you had people in the government and the ruling elites that theoretically had another set of values. And I said that's why they were hiding, or that's why they said we can have a enlightened occupation, or we are better for them, or do all kinds of things. But with time, this generation has disappeared, and now this is the norm. These young men are born into these norms. And now the cruelty of the settlements has also, I mean, the settlements were always an instrument in the hands of Israeli governments that wanted to impede the possibility, the creation of a Palestinian state. Yeah. Something that most of the Palestinians at a certain moment supported, alongside Israel. So the settlers were a means, an instrument, but they have become the golem that controls now the creator. And they decide, since the mid-90s, they dictate the path. The path and the pace of this, I don't like to say dehumanization of the Palestinians because the Palestinians are human and remain. The dehumanization is the dehumanization of the Israeli society.
Well said. And on that note, is that mic working? We're about to get away. Okay, till then, we're going to steal, Najla, I'm going to steal your mic.
Yes.
If you don't mind.
I got the message.
While we wait for mics, and I'm going to get one of my team members up there to come grab a mic. We haven't got two right now, Frank, but we're going to get
You can have mine too.
We've got one for no, we'll keep, you need to answer the questions.
yeah,
So
okay.
you can't all give
Yeah,
up
yeah.
your mics, because you're the ones who are going to be answering the questions. So we're going to open up to the audience. Oh, there's more light. Look how many of you came out tonight. Thank you so much. Actually, we're going to throw another one in there as well to get it quick, and then these guys will share one. All right, so we're going to take 3 questions at a time. I do every time I moderate a panel, I say this, I say it again. Questions, not speeches.
Thank you.
We want to hear from our panelists. I love you all, but we really don't want to hear from you. We want to hear from the panelists. Hear your questions. So let's take 3 at a time. Keep them brief, and we'll go. Yes, whoever's hand went up there. Yes, right there.
My question is, I will start with a comment, sorry. Thank you for this film.
Okay, that's a good one.
30 years ago, I was in Israel and I visited battered women's shelter, and the women that I was meeting with explained that the militarization of Israeli culture was contributing to the violence in the culture.
Yeah.
Do you think, do the panelists think that this is an argument that would be well received in Israel as maybe a way to think about the impact on Israeli culture?
The militarization of Israel. Okay, let's take gentlemen here at the front, and then we're going to go. If we've got another microphone, whoever's furthest back, we're going to take them.
Yeah, Amira, I just want to push back on this idea. The question is, in a world where Benny Morris is writing in Haaretz that we should drop a nuclear bomb, Israel should drop a nuclear bomb in Iran, and where you have intellectuals in all major parties in Israel, Yair Lapid, you name it, they're all terrible, right? So yes, the settlers are awful, but let's not kid ourselves. It's mainstream. It's mainstream in intellectuals, artists, in different flavors, but basically all the same. David Grossman ultimately is not that different from all the rest of them.
Okay, and then if there's a mic, someone's got a mic at the back.
She was right here. Oh.
We'll come next round. Furthest, I said someone furthest back. There you go.
Thank you. This morning there was a demonstration, I think in Jerusalem, of a large group of Jews who refuse to take part in the war from the army. But they're not represented here today. This was the anti-Zionist ultra-Orthodox. And I've noticed since the beginning of this war, their comments on Twitter have been morally clear, absolutely accurate, and yet we have no communication with them, I think. Is there some way to have a dialogue with them and integrate them into a common movement?
Okay, let's go to Simone. Do you want to take that last one first? On the no, you don't want to. She's like, no,
I can-
not me.
I'll take it.
Amira's going to take it.
You're going to take it?
Amira, I feel like you're going to take all 3 of these, but go on.
Go ahead, take
If I
it.
Unless Najla
remember,
wants to
yeah,
go
no, I'll
first.
start.
Pick them in whatever order you like.
Yeah.
But just keep
So
them
the
brief,
first
and then
one,
we'll go back to the audience.
it's all are questions that need more than a brief answer.
Unfortunately,
Yes, unfortunately.
I'm
So
going to be strict.
in a way, it's a question about why do we put the blame on settlers? I didn't. I said that they fix now since the mid-90s. They fix the pace and the path of Israel, and they are the forerunners of Israeli drive to expel Palestinians, and now we see it is become a genocidal drive because they rely on the Bible, because they rely on their messianism. So they say radicalize. Now, in a way, what you say that everything has existed in Israel since 48 or before. So there is no difference between Israel of today and Israel of 48 or 49. I think it is a long discussion. I think it is a long discussion also about United States. You can say that Trump is the, just as it was during slavery, America was in slavery. So you don't give credit to any movement of change for change that was able to block some tendencies which are these criminal tendencies. So I think it is a debate more than a debate about settlers and their
And the ultra-Orthodox?
Look, the ultra-Orthodox is a separate enclosed society. We don't have any way to get near it for their own reasons and religious reasons. But they give they neutralize something of the, or they show that military is not a default, is not the normal thing. So they somehow can challenge some Israeli accepted rules, really rules and laws, that there is no life without the military. But I don't think that we should too romanticize because they are about their position. It is, you know, there are some Orthodox that are still very firmly anti-Zionist, and they stick to it, and in a way that they are also very hostile to the state. But most of the Orthodox who refuse to go to the army are very racists, and they are a majority among the settlers in two big cities in the West Bank. And they have developed this racism because they have to protect their loot. So they have to, they do the racism is always a rationalization for looting somebody else and for,
And the militarization question about society, Israeli?
Yeah, the Israeli society has been military since the beginning, and there were, and it was so successful because it was an upgrading mobility, gave upgrading mobility possibilities for youngsters. It brought people together. It created this brotherhood among soldiers. And the military has a very intoxicating, the use of arms, military, and not only in Israel, has a very intoxicating effect on the society and on men. And this is here a mutual thing. The masculinist, patriarchal societies and traditions and roots enhance militarization, and the other way around. And I think this is a danger that many face, and also Palestinians face this danger of the cult of militarism.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. We said take a question here at the front. Then we'll take a question there.
Where it seems we're at a point where there's no voting your way out of a genocide. What would you suggest is the most important thing that we can do to really create change about the situation?
Great question. We're going to take, while we wait to get the microphone to this person here, we're going to go someone at the back. Is there another microphone for someone at the back? Pick someone. Whoever's at the back with a microphone, stand up. While you going to wait, we're going to go back and then come to you. Who's at the back asking a question? Speak now, or forever hold your peace.
Do you think, kind of in the way, on the one hand, there's this argument that this film is revealing something that Americans are not already seeing? Do you think that this is also working inversely, where Americans are consuming this kind of content, and it is normalizing genocide in the eyes of many Americans, including in the American political establishment, who, as Simone Zimmerman very aptly pointed out, has now voted not to recognize the numbers that are coming out?
Interesting question. Okay, let's take the third one here.
My question is there a legitimate future for the word Zionism? Does it even matter, or is all this maybe in the words?
It only took till 8:36 for that question to appear on this program. Good questions, all. All right, so this time let's open it up to Simone, Najla. Just a reminder of the questions. What is the best way to affect change? We don't think we've got to vote our way out of a genocide. Have we normalized this kind of stuff? The inverse of actually trying to show people, especially for people in power, and what is the role of Zionism? You could take that easy one first, Simone. I know you want.
I'll try to say a few things I'll be quick, but like, I guess there's like a part of me that wants to say there's a spiritual practice answer that like all of us should probably be investigating and processing. What does it mean that we're actually taking in this much violence all of the time? And I can just say for myself personally, it's like so devastating and I do think all of us should be like investigating what is it doing to us to be taking all of this in all of the time. And so I encourage people to like join organizations, join movements, go outside, be in community, actually talk about this stuff with people, because I think just like living on the internet right now is such a deeply soul-sucking experience. So that's one thing. And the other thing is then like never forgetting what we're seeing and forcing every person with power to have to reckon and answer with that. And I think, you know, this moment has obviously exposed American foreign policy for being based in total hypocrisy. We could preach human rights in one country and then support a genocide in another. But it's, again, to me, like, I couldn't help but come into this conversation today just with like the crisis of American democracy that is like happening around us right now, where it's just
what
like,
could you possibly be referring to?
yeah, but I mean, it's like, it's how, you know, how can any of us be convinced that this, like, I just think that there's so many ways that I can say I just see the Democratic Party, Democratic leadership just not being up to the challenge of protecting democracy in any way, shape, or form when they are like so clearly green lighting and aiding this fascist movement overseas, and then like denying what they're doing over here. And so yeah. I'm not sure that I know what we can do to fix it, but it's very clear that there's like a robust movement that has to be built to counter all of this.
Do you want to briefly deal with the Zionism question?
I mean, I think I would just say that, you know, again, to me, it's just about facing that, you know, there is an element of Zionism, what Zionism has always meant in practice, that has had embedded in it the denial, like that, you know, Palestinians have always had to be the excluded other from that project. And, you know, the Nakba being the kind of like founding act of denial and displacement and destruction of Palestinian life and Palestinian society. And, you know, again, to this question of where does this genocidal animus come from, it comes from a supremacist mindset, supremacist structures that have been allowed to take root and to flourish for decades. And of course, the moment that they're triggered, this genocidal animus comes so fully out. If you see Palestinians as a threat to your society, as an other that can never be part of your society, as, you know, the non-Jewish other that has to be excluded from this project, and I think anybody who calls themselves a Zionist still has to grapple with that.
Najla?
Yeah, that was really well said, as always. I did want to say that in terms of, well, just in terms of what I have witnessed and what have I participated in the discussions I have participated in, both private and somewhat public, since October 7th, it's hard for us as Palestinians and Arabs to want to engage when it seems like there is a large intra-Jewish conversation that needs to be had. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how we reconcile all these different gradations of Judaism, Zionism, etc. But I have noticed more than anything that I have been more silent and have been listening to other people grapple with information that makes them uncomfortable. And I think that there is something there. I don't know if there is a large Jewish community that can come together and figure all this out, but I'm noticing that that is something that I'd never seen before to this degree. The other thing I wanted to, sorry, what were the other, I'm sorry, there was another question.
Question about normalizing.
Oh, the normalizing. I find this
change.
so fascinating, and possibly because I had the misfortune of being in Lebanon as a child. When you've experienced war and been under bombs, there is no part of you that says, this is what happens in war. This is what happens in war. I have heard that said by more newscasters and American politicians and Israeli politicians than I have ever heard in my life. And I don't know how to penetrate that, but somebody needs to penetrate that, because nobody who's ever experienced a war says things like that,
Also,
or acts like it's a sports game. This idea that there's pro-Hamas and pro-Israel, that everyone's,
Yes, well
if
said.
I'm not, somebody said to me, literally said to me, I listened to this woman talk, she was pro-Hamas, and I tried to listen, and I said, what do you mean she was pro-Hamas? And the woman said, I'm sorry, she was Palestinian. And that's a problem. So I think that in that regard, I think that, you know, some actual exploration of what war actually is might be nice to do.
well-
But when you're in power, that never happens.
Well said. I mean, listening to Ayelet Shaked in that film, she did the line about most moral army in the world.
Yeah.
And as I was on a debate stage with Gideon Levy last week, and he said,
Oh, I saw
why
that.
can't we be the second most moral army? Like Luxembourg, why do we have to be the most moral army? We're not even number 2, which I thought was well put. And the other line that really pisses me off, and you just touched on it, which is this war is hell line.
Yeah,
Because I can
with that.
assure you, on October the 7th, if Palestinians had said, oh, 1,200 people died in Israel, war is hell.
Exactly.
We would have said, what the hell is that response to October the 7th? And yet, the response of a lot of Israelis is, oh yeah, 35,000 dead, war is hell. It's only one side gets to say war is hell. Really pisses me off. Sorry, let me get that off my chest. I'm not a panelist, but I have to get that off my chest. We're out of time, and I'm going to take 3 questions if you're all super short, and then the panel's really short. We're going to zoom through this really quickly. Frank, do you want to go here? And then somebody find somebody at the back? Yes, go.
Hi.
Short.
I was struck by the comment about self-censorship in Israeli media. In as much as this is an American war, as much as it's an Israeli war, what posture should American journalists take to avoid that self-censorship?
Great question.
Your message to them be.
Let's take number 2 at the back. Anyone who has a mic at the back, speak now. I can't see any.
Where are these videos in the American media?
Great.
Where are?
Where are the videos in the American media? I'll repeat all the questions.
I think these are all questions for you, man.
And then third one here, last but not least.
Hi, so for a while I felt like the tides were changing. In media and social media, the younger generations were actually making a change. And then we have the debate between Trump and Biden and between possibly using it as an insult. So what do you think our response to that would be? Is what we're doing enough? Should we do something
Great.
differently?
Great questions. All right, so I'm going to divide them up in this way. I'm going to take the question on where are the videos in the media. They're not there. There's a real problem, and you know, I was working at MSNBC shortly after October 7th. Look, to be fair, I want to be fair as well. There is an issue where you have to fact check this stuff. There is a problem on social media where people just share stuff that's not true. So you've all seen, you know, a video from Gaza that actually turns out to be from Syria. That happens, right? And then people say, ha, you shared fake news. So there is an issue in terms of fact checking some of this stuff. Now, the reason we made this documentary is because Zeteo, thanks to all of you, has some limited resources to be able to do the fact checking, to hire award-winning journalists, to be able to go get the response from the Israeli military and make a professional film where we are showing you, we don't just did the videos, we found the soldiers behind the videos. And I think that's really important, but that's not an excuse for the American media as a whole to just ignore some of the stuff coming out of here. And I saw a tweet from my former colleague Leila Al-Arian recently at Al Jazeera, who made the point that the videos about the lingerie and the women, the video about the abuse of Palestinian women's possessions, that should be one of the big stories of this conflict. It's the most untold story of this conflict. So I think it is truly shameful the way in which the American media has just wiped out the fact that this is all being done on camera, on tape, and the Israelis are, from the horse's mouth, literally. That's one of the reasons, again, as I said at the start, we wanted to make this film, because we wanted to show what is going on. In terms of advice for American journalists, I have a lot, but it's for another day. Amira, what advice would you give to American journalists dealing with self-censorship on this issue?
Just behave like journalists.
So simple.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how much.
But look, we know that there are editors, and we know that there are the financiers, and we know that there are the readers. So it's not just the journalists themselves. It's a whole beehive that decides. And like in Israel, people relied on the New York Times, and they thought that the New York Times is really covering well this war. It just tells you how little, how nothing is published in Israel. If the New York Times is the good, is a
savage. Sitting in New York City, Amira Hass stuck a knife into the New York Times.
Look, what came for Haaretz was published by New York Times, some investigations that were, or some coverage that does not exist in the Israeli media.
Yeah, I mean, I would love a profile piece, not by the New York Times, but about New York Times headline writers. That I would love to see. Who are these people
my dad taught me how to
who
read the
torture
paper
themselves
when
into
I was
avoiding
a little
any
girl.
kind of agency or... anyways, I'm going to give you the last word, Najla, on the question about, I thought that was a really important question, and I noticed it, and I made this point. I've been traveling in a lot of circles, lefty Muslim circles, promoting Zeteo over the last few months, and I do meet a lot of Palestinian Americans, Arab Americans, who are like, they're so angry at Biden, understandably so, that they're like, well, Trump wouldn't be as bad as this, and I have to remind them that Trump is an anti-Arab racist.
Right.
And I think if you watched the debate last week, you know, now Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden are Palestinians.
Right.
Because Palestinian is a pejorative. So we've reached the point now, we don't even have to say Palestinian terrorist or Hamas, it's just Palestinian.
Well, at least they're saying Palestinian.
Yes.
They used to call us Arabs,
At least they're
so we've
getting a
gotten
mention.
somewhere. The question about look, I want to say something. I am 50 years old, don't tell anybody, and I have seen massive change in 50 years, massive. I'm a little pissed because this conversation and all the conversations that have been going on for 9 months were happening in my apartment as a child my whole life, and nobody was paying attention. So I feel like a lot of people are late to the party, but I'm so happy everyone's here. My father, I said this at a demonstration, my father taught me that solidarity is the greatest expression of love. I never knew what that meant. This year I learned exactly what that meant. And I cannot believe I'm sitting in a theater in New York City and I saw this film screened here.
Props to Angelica Cinema for writing this film.
Just to add on to that, in 1998, my dad made a film called In Search of Palestine, and not one network in this country would air it. We had some fancy friends who were donors of PBS, so PBS aired it for one night. And he has a sort of run-in with one of the Israeli military officers who's in the process of bulldozing Bedouin homes. And my father confronts him and says, how can you do this? How can you? And he's like, this is state-owned land, and he has a British accent, and his name is Peter Lerner, and every night he's been on like ABC News since the beginning of this thing. But I was at first angry. I was like, how come 25 years later this guy still gets to bulldoze homes? And you know, my dad's dead, but that has nothing to do with it. But anyway, so, but I still see the fact that there has been so much change. So for everything where I'm like, that guy's still going, there is so much more that has happened that has moved us forward. I don't know how we get further forward, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that.
When I was in Toronto last week, being an idiot, taking part in a crazy debate, Gideon Levy, who was there, said to me, he said, are you Palestinian? And I said, no. First time I met Gideon, I've known him all life. He said, oh, I thought you were Palestinian. I'm so sorry. And I said, no, I'm not Palestinian. I'm of Indian origin. He goes, so how did you get into all this? How do you know all this stuff? And I said, it's a great question. And I had to think back, and I said, I go back to my college years, and there were two massive influences on me. One was your late father, massive influence on me, and I'm sure many in this room. And I had the privilege at the age of 23 as a young TV researcher coming to New York and Columbia and meeting him for like 10 minutes as part of a TV crew, which was a great moment.
I hope he was nice.
He was. He said mean things about Christopher Hitchens, but he was nice.
Fine, yeah. That tracks.
That was 2002. It was when Christopher Hitchens was going crazy over 9/11. And the other person I should say to everyone tonight who was a huge influence on me on this issue was Noam Chomsky, who's not doing so well. So let's all send him some prayers and positive thoughts tonight. That was the Palestinian and the Jew who influenced this Indian Brit to get involved in the subject. And here we are, decades later, playing this film.
I have to say something.
Yeah, I want to give you the.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to give you the last word. But before I give
No,
you the
no.
before I give you the last word, because it's going to be amazing, I'm sure.
No.
I just want to thank you all again for coming. I'm going to say, please, if you're not a subscriber or supporter of Jewish Currents, please become so tonight. Please, if you're not a subscriber or supporter of Zeteo, please do so tonight, because as we heard tonight, the American media ain't doing so well on this issue. So support those of us who are. We appreciate those of you who already are supporting us, and especially those of you who turned up tonight. Thank you so much. And I'm going to give the very last word to somebody who, when I heard she was in town, I said, we do this screening the night when Amira Hass is free. So we're very privileged to have you here. And the last word is yours.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to steal the last word, and it looks very Israeli, I know. But I want to tell you that it's hard for me to share with you the laughter, because let's not forget that right now there is bombing on Gaza. People and children might be killed and are being killed, not only warriors. Gaza is wiped out. It is going on for 9 months and more, and there is no horizon that it's going to stop soon. And with all the changes in the attitude towards Palestinians, we haven't succeeded to stop it. No one of us thought on the first or second month that it would last so long. No one of us imagined that it would last so long, and here it does. And I think that we have to remember that the main goal of each one of us is to give the voice that demands to stop this genocide.
Yes.
And then we'll talk about the other things.
Thank you all for coming tonight. Appreciate you all. Give it up again for Simone and Najla and Amira, and for Basement Films.